Well, hey, welcome to Glass House to Go. This is our Easter service, our Easter time, our Easter message, and I am actually in a graveyard. When I think about that, not trying to be in any way melodramatic or uh, even disrespectful, but looking around, I am looking at flowers and gravestones and different messages that families have put out here. And of course, this is a time when a lot of people have that on their mind, and rightly so. Um, and so I couldn't think of a better place to come out and do this than here. And, um, when I think about some of the things, just introing this real quickly, this is an interesting time for everyone. I think of all the times that I've been in very crowded spaces for Easter, where it was just packed rooms and multiple services and people waiting to get in and lines around the corner and all that kind of stuff. And this last month for everyone, but I know it has been this way for me. I've been in interesting places where usually it would be teeming with people and there was nobody there. In fact, I'm right off of the Davidson College campus. This is a part of Davidson College toward the back end of it. A lot of people don't even know this is here, but this was a Christian Aid Society, they called it, and it was actually a burial spot for people who could not ordinarily afford a decent burial. And so that was one of the things that a Christian society started way back then. Anyway, there's some very old gravestones here. Um, but I'm saying that to say that, like even in our own family, my mom passed away within the last year, and I've done that graveside, and also thinking back to my father-in-law, Len's dad, Bill Sheeter. Uh, his Easter, he died over Easter of 2018, and so, it was either just an interesting time of life for us to reflect on what the resurrection is. And so, one of the things that I missed back in March, that many people missed, is March Madness. I think about the fact that just basketball games that we used to come to just a little while ago here on the campus, things are sitting empty. There's empty arenas, there's empty times. But the reason they call March Madness, we've always enjoyed watching it, but March Madness, the reason they call it that is it's all of the college teams getting together, and it's one and done. If you win, you advance. If you lose, you're done, and that's it, and so anything can happen during that time. And I was thinking about this. They canceled that this year. They just didn't have that with the coronavirus, the COVID-19 pandemic, and just in some ways more important things happening. But I think about this. What today's theme, I want to talk with you about this, which is that it's not over till it's over. There's a lot of people certainly under a lot of pressure right now, and so many things that you're like, man, it looks like the end. It looks like I don't know how to go on past here. I don't know what tomorrow is going to be like. And while that's unprecedented in some way, it's actually precedented. I guess is the way I would like to think about that with you today, is that people talk a lot about this being unprecedented, and I go, well, that means that nothing's ever preceded it, that it's never happened before. And I think no, usually what that means is it to me it's a new experience, But just looking here at the graveyard, it's a reminder to me that though something might be unprecedented in my life, it isn't unprecedented. It's precedented. And what I wanted to talk with you about today is the thought that it's not over till it's over. And specifically, it's not over until it's overtime. And some of the most exciting games I've ever seen have been won or lost in overtime. And maybe you've seen that too. As the clock runs down, you got fractions of a second, and then somehow there's a buzzer beater that goes in or something, and the game goes on and into overtime. And there was an example just 4 years ago in March Madness, and it was the college basketball playoffs again, and and there was a game there between Northern Iowa and Texas A&M. And you might not be a sports fan, but I hope you'll stay, plugged in for this thought, because there's so much in it. The Texas Aggies, A&M, were down by 12 points with only 34 seconds left in the fourth quarter. Okay, so the game was just about over. And even the commentators were all just saying, well, there's no way, it looks like this one's done. And, people were starting to pack their stuff up. And I don't know if you've ever been to sporting events or any events, really, concerts or anything else, where people are like, well, I got to beat the crowd. I got to get out of here. I got to hurry and get home. I don't want to get stuck in traffic, and this thing's over, so I'm done. Well, that's exactly the mentality that was going on. And there was, if you've ever seen this, they do it now with sports. There's actually a running total, a computer analysis at any point in the game, at every stage of the game, where they will tell you what the percentage chance of a win or a loss at this point. And with 34 seconds left in the fourth quarter, mathematical models actually had the probability at 99.999 that Iowa was going to win this game. Okay, so in other words, 0.001% chance that A&M could win. But in the next moments, Iowa actually suffered what commenters called the biggest collapse in tournament history. And Texas A&M overcame impossible odds, evened the game, and won it in double overtime. And if you go look that one up later and you watch it online, you can see what exactly happened. But one of the things that you don't see are these stories behind it. If you look in the background, you'll actually see the arena starting to empty out before the game is over. If you're watching it before the overtime started, there were people actually heading for the exits and saying, well, this one's done. This is, I won or I lost. I mean, people from both sides were leaving because they wanted to beat the crowd. And let me just highlight a couple of people's story, because it's pretty interesting. There's a guy named Josh Gibson. He drove 315 miles from his home in Texas to Oklahoma City to watch this game, right? And Gibson was a family member. He's the brother-in-law of a Texas A&M coach. And they had, spent all this time going across country to support and all the rest of this. And so when the thing was going so south, it didn't look like A&M was going to win. It didn't look like they had any chance. This guy actually took his 10-year-old son out of their seats, which were in the right behind the A&M bench, and headed for the exit. And so they were actually watching the final seconds and saying, well, it still doesn't look good, but they wanted to beat the traffic, and so they headed out and left. And 10 miles into his drive home, he began receiving calls and texts saying, hey, where are you, man? You're not in your seats. Can you believe what just happened? And he was like, what happened? He missed, with his 10-year-old son, this family moment because he'd headed out for the exit saying this one's over. But he wasn't the only one. There was a guy named Admon Gilder Sr. Admon Gilder Sr. And his son was the Texas player, the A&M player, who actually made the last layup and sent the game into overtime. And as he was making this shot, his parents were heading home to Dallas already, completely oblivious to the overtime outcome. When it looked like they were losing the game, his mom's health is pretty fragile, and so she just couldn't take the emotional weight of watching them lose, and so they left. And so thinking about this is how he tells the story. This father of this player, Edmund Gilder Sr., he stopped at a gas station, and there was a man there at the gas station with a Texas A&M hat, right? And so this player's dad said to that man, shame about the game, and the guy with the hat, the A&M hat, said, what do you mean? What do you mean with shame about the game? Game's not over. It's still going on. And that's when this guy told the stranger told the father of the son who just made the shot, saying, your son just tied the game. When he told him his name, he's like, oh, that's actually my kid plays on the team. He said, well, your son just tied the game. And so when you think about that, friends and family weren't the only ones who abandoned hope. Oop, we have a bug coming into the system there. But hope he doesn't sting me. But three Texas A&M managers left the bench with about a minute to go, preparing the locker room for a quick exit because they were going to be so disappointed with the loss. And in fact, they heard about the win from the locker room. And one of the managers said, we kind of gave up. I'm not going to lie. We did. Now, again, when you think about that little illustration and moving on from that to think about Easter, to think about resurrection, to think in this place about life and death moments, here's the point of all those stories, which is that it's not just people who are far from a story who can miss the moment. In fact, somebody who's a huge fan, somebody who is very connected, a friend, a family member, can be the very person saying, oh, it's over, it's done, this thing, there's no hope left. And so when I think about that, the old saying that it's not over till it's over, well, here's a profound thought, I think, for Easter, for Resurrection Sunday, which is it's not over until it's over time. It's not over until time is over. And when death is defeated, that's when everything is done. And looking around, you say, well, death marches on, doesn't it? I mean, doesn't it come for everyone? Well, let me remind you that there was one who won in overtime. Jesus won in overtime. Jesus defeated death in overtime. And death has defeated everyone who's ever lived, right? It's never lost. And when I think about this, people say after a death, I'm sorry about your loss, I'm sorry about your loss. And there is no loss greater than this. There's no way I can minimize the sting, the hurt, the pain of death. I've experienced it, you've experienced it, we'll experience it. And the people in the scripture, you see in the Old Testament, there was a hope that they had. There was a hope that they had in Jesus that was probably even higher than the hopes they had in themselves and in others, because this guy was different. And then on Friday, right, that we now call Good Friday, but it wasn't good to them at the time, he was crucified. And the clock ran down on the cross, right? You see it. You see him, the life ebbing away from Jesus, and there were people watching, his followers, and they said, I can't keep looking, man. They were thinking, it'll turn around. There's still time. Jesus is going to do something. And then time went on, and you see them watching him suffer and watching all that went on. And it says in the scripture that one by one they left, that his followers, I mean, we're talking the apostles, we're talking the A-team, we're talking the people who had been closest to Jesus. And just one by one they left. Fan and foe had left. People who had been there to mock him, people who had been there to hurl insults, lost interest even. They're like, this is over. This is done. His life is of no consequence. And so everyone in attendance there, pretty much everyone who was there, was thinking this: the cross is a loss. The cross is a loss. It looks like a loss. It looked like an L. It looked like game over. It looked like death had won. And death had beaten even Jesus, even this great man who had brought sight to the blind. He had brought hope to the hopeless. He had brought forgiveness to people who thought that they were past the grace of God. He had done so many things to give hope to people. He had reached out to people who thought, well, there's no hope for me. God doesn't care anything about me. And he had actually turned funerals into basically party processions. He had brought Lazarus out of the grave, and all this. And they're like, well, Jesus is going to do something for on this Friday for sure. And they had hopes, but those hopes were dashed. And that person who had brought others to life, who had brought life to their life, who had brought meaning to their life, Well, if you'd read a newspaper or a news article, I think it would have said on Friday, the headline would have been, "Death defeats life." Jesus loses the big battle with death. Death wins this one. But I think it's important to remember that Friday was not the final score. And I think there's a lot of times in my life that I'm looking at something in progress. I'm looking at something even that's in digress, so to speak. It's getting worse and it's getting worse and it's getting worse. And I'm saying, well, this is over. But Friday wasn't the final score. And wherever you find yourself, wherever I find myself, wherever we are today, this is not the final reckoning. See, the story wasn't over. The reports were wrong. I think that's important to think. The reports were wrong. The news was wrong. The game went into overtime and they didn't know it. It actually went into double overtime. So Saturday, you had Friday, Saturday, Sunday, with the resurrection story, and we now are I'm actually giving this message on a Sunday, right, on the day that Jesus we commemorate his resurrection, right? But it's important to know that there was a Saturday in between that, a Saturday that was a very sad day. It wasn't a sunny day for them, and Friday wasn't good for them. The only reason those things can now be looked at in the perspective they are is that Sunday's headline was "Death actually defeated." Death was defeated. Death didn't win this one. Jesus won this one. We thought it was over and it wasn't. And so 1 Corinthians 15 says the final enemy to be defeated is death. And when you think about what tournament brackets are, when they do these sporting contests, something like March Madness, like I used the example there, you win, you advance. You go on to a tougher team, right? You fight a bigger battle. And Jesus won so many battles along the way, but there's the bad battle, right? The big battle. You can't declare yourself the champion if you don't win the big one, right? If you don't win the last and final game. And death is the final foe. I mean, when I think about that, I can win lots of little battles along the way, but if death wins in the end, then can I be as transparent as to say, if death is the end, well, then there's a lot of stuff that I say, who cares? I mean, who even cares? I mean, you accomplished something. Man, I did amazing things in my life. Yeah, but you died. Yeah, but I built a business and people were, helped with that. And you go, so what? You died and so did all of them. I mean, in the end, if death is the end, if that's the end of the headline, death wins in the end, man, that's a pretty big loss to all of it. In fact, you could just look around and say, everybody loses. Everybody loses in the end. There's a date when death wins no matter what. It always wins the final battle. But that's not true because of Jesus. See, that's the whole thing. Jesus reversed that curse. He actually is the guy who won the big one. He beat the final foe, the ultimate enemy. He came back from the dead. And see, sin, one of the things that you see is that death came because of sin, If you've ever thought that through and said, like, why did God create such beautiful life, but there's death, You look around and you go, people I've loved, people I've lost. This place would be so great if not for death, suffering and death. And what I like to say is this, that sin wins in regulation. See, regulation is what they call regular gameplay, right? During the regular clock running of time, during my time here on earth, sin will win in the end. I mean, it will. That's why they call it regulation. It's the rules and regulations that keep us all sinners from being winners. In the end, we're going to lose some things. We're going to foul out. We're going to get ejected. If death wins in the end, then all is lost. Even the biggest winners on earth, you form a friendship and, well, in the end, both of you die. You have love shown, but to what end? You have lives lived, but to what end, right? And you say, Scott, that's so discouraging. It is. If death cannot be defeated. That's why this matters so much. This is why the only thing that really matters in the end is this the end? Is this life all there is? If death can't be defeated, we are lost. If we win all the way along, but in the end, the big battle, it goes down to a L in the win-loss column in my life and says, well, Scott, he won a lot of games. He lived a lot. He laughed a lot. He loved a lot. But in the end, death won. And I don't like that. I can't accept that. There's got to be something more than that. You know, maybe you remember that old saying, and it was, the one who dies with the most toys wins, but the one who dies with toys still dies. And I sometimes do this, you know, when I go to a medical appointment or I do whatever else, they have those forms that you got to fill out page after page after page. And I look at that, and I always am grateful during that time of the fact that I check a few things, but I don't have to check everything. I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong. But if we could cure everything, you know, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, mental illness, you know, COVID-19, COVID-20, 21, 22, 23, whatever out there ends up being done, but we can't cure death, then our life is just kind of one and done. You go, but this is the thing to remember. Life was won by one. That one was Jesus. He won it, and he never lost again. And he said, and if you believe in me, I won't lose your life either. You won't lose your life. You'll win in overtime. When time is over, it's not really over. When there's a date of your death, well, that's just a date of your transition into eternity. That's just the day that time is over for you. But you win in overtime. When time is over, that's overtime. And death has hit all of us. Maybe eventually, maybe recently. I mean, this is a time when there are going to be people that we know and we love and we care about who are going to suffer and maybe even die during this time. I'm talking to people who, this is not a theory. This is not theoretical. This is a practical reality, and it's absolutely devastating, and you don't get over it. I don't get over it. I am not over the death of my mom. I am not over the death of the many friends that have died in my life, the family members that have died in my life, the funerals I have done. I have done probably personally, I think about 150 funerals. I'm not over those. I don't forget those. Those affected me. You don't get around it. But what if the Gospels didn't even exist? What if they ended at the cross? Think about the New Testament books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, if you know those. What if Friday was the final story? What if the story ended that way? Roll the credits. You know, Jesus lived a great life. He helped a bunch of people. Of course, they all died. He died. And that's kind of it, you know. And that's pretty much what you can look forward to. End of story, roll the credits, the end. Jesus was crucified. He died. He lived a great life, but he died a horrible death. Final score, you know, life 0, death 1. 1 more. Let that sink in for a second. Let it just sink in. What if death wins every last life? What if death wins in the end? Life loses. Well, I can tell you this, there would be no New Testament. I wouldn't bother reading the Bible if it ended with Friday. I wouldn't celebrate Good Friday and say, well, TGIF, it's Friday. Good Friday, you know, great Friday. Looking forward to Friday. There would be nothing to celebrate if the story ended there. The silence of the tomb, the date of birth and the date of death, and that's all we have, just a little dash in between that. The stone rolled in front of the opening to mark the end of a wonderful life, and you say, well, that's the end of Jesus. And man, if he lived that great a life and it still came to an end and that's the end of the story, then what hope is there for me? How could you possibly call that good news? I don't even know how I could go on in an honest way in life, thinking that this is all there is, and think, well, yeah, but this is great, isn't it? Isn't it great? It's not great. Matthew 27, Death looked like it won this one, but there's another chapter. There's Matthew 28. There's overtime. See, in death won in Matthew 27, next to the last chapter. But in Matthew 28, that's the overtime chapter. And death actually lost. And there'd been people who left in Matthew 27 going, well, that's the end of this story. And it wasn't. Jesus won in overtime. That's what Matthew 28 declares. The book of Mark has 16 chapters. And in Mark 15, it has people saying, well, we really hope this was going to turn around. The final seconds, there goes the buzzer, I think. I didn't even stay around to listen for it. There was life, there was hope, but no, now there's just death and darkness. That's Mark 15, but guess what? There's Mark 16. And it's like Mark 16, the sun rises on Sunday. And it's like, wait, what is this? The Son of God rose? Death has been defeated? This is a stunning upset. We'd already written the headlines that death wins. And now we're having to strike it out, tear it up, and say, no, wait. We got the story wrong. The news is wrong. Death has been defeated in a stunning upset. See, the good news is the bad news is wrong. The good news is that the bad news is a lie. And so death has been defeated. That's the truth. Death wins in the end. That's not true. Luke 23, see, Luke 24 tells the story. You know it. Luke has 24 chapters. But what if it had 23? See, it's written by a doctor. Doctors know a lot of things. There's a lot of detail in Luke. But Luke 23, this is what the doctor knew, Dr. Luke. He said, while there's life, there's hope. But, people don't really come back from the dead like that. The spear in the side, the crucifixion, that's not good. It's not really a survivability there. And then you have Luke 24, and the doctor says, wait. I've never seen this before. Death has been defeated. Folks, get back in your seats. Come back in. Get out of the parking lot. Turn on the radio. Turn on the TV. Folks, death has been defeated. And then you've got John. I love the book of John. But John 19 says, well, death looks to have won this one. Wait. John 20, death has been defeated. Jesus won in overtime. And then you have the great news of him going to the disciples, the guys who had left early, right? Who had abandoned the cross, who basically said, we out. This is over. And it tells the story of him going one by one to them and saying, hey, because I won, you win. Sin doesn't win. Death doesn't win. Your life matters, because even when your physical matter is over, it isn't over. It's over time. Yes, time is over. It will be over for you. But at the end of that is eternity with me. And so I think about this, whenever I'm in a graveyard, and I don't spend a lot of time in them, but I have spent time in them, and so will you. And someday, I suppose, I might spend my matter, might spend a lot of time in it, But when you think about that, there's always crosses, or often crosses in graveyards. There's crosses there. And I think about this, the cross is a plus sign, right? When you look about, I hope you'll always see it that way. It's not a loss, right? See, the dash that's between two dates, it looks like a minus sign to me. Sometimes they'll put the birth date and the death date, and there's a dash in between those, and you go, oof. And that, no matter how long or short that dash is, that looks like a minus to me. That looks like a loss. But then I look and I see that cross, and I realize, hey, this is a win. It's a positive. It's a plus sign. The cross is not a loss. Friday is not the end of the story. Saturday is not the end of the story. Sunday is coming, and Sunday is here. And when I think about that, someday, I'll run out of Sundays, right? They talk about a month of Sundays or something. I mean, someday I'll run out of time. The time will go out. The buzzer will go, eh. People say, man, I'm sorry for your loss. Maybe to people who love me, man, I'm sorry for your loss. Scott this guy was special to you and special to me. And we have those conversations, and I'm thankful for the people who I love and who have loved me and all the rest. But you know what? Time will be over for all of us. But over time is where it really happens, If someone's somewhere, and in the final seconds of my life, there's medical people there or something, and it goes, flat line, and they go, oh, we lost him, and you go, it's not true. It's not true. The news is not true. I'm not lost. I found that this is true, not just in theory, but I'm actually experiencing it, because my last breath here will be my first breath there. Because when Jesus came back from the dead, and he did, it changed everything. I mean, it changed the lives of those who were hiding. They stopped hiding. The people who were hurting and saying like, oh, we had hoped. And he says, and you even hoped too small, because you were just kind of hoping for here. But he said, I had a hope that actually went far beyond here, far beyond the fall, far beyond this fallen world in which, sin wins in regulation. Sin wins maybe in the first, second, third, fourth quarter. But you know what? When you really think about that, if the cross is not a loss, then nothing I go through in my life will be a loss. Even the losses can be a win, because they can get me to focus in on eternity. It's the defeat of death. These are life and death issues. And sitting here again on the ground, I'm thankful to be on it on this day rather than under it, right? They sometimes say, again, I'm not trying to be irreverent, but sometimes they say, any day above ground is a good day. But not every day above ground feels good, right? It doesn't. There's times when it's hard, it's cold, it's difficult, it's heartbreaking. But here's what I would encourage myself to do, and you along with that, is don't call a game over before it's over. It's over, it's hopeless, there's nothing to look forward to. Oh, there's everything to look forward to. Because what Easter says to me, what Resurrection Sunday says to me, is that through the lens of looking back on that, you'll look at the empty seat and the things you missed, and you'll look at the things and say, well, oh man, I shouldn't have called it until it was over. It's not over till it's over. And when time is over, life has really just begun. And so thanks for tuning in. Thanks for spending this time with us here at Glass House to Go. And again, I pray that wherever you are, whoever you're with or whoever you're distant socially from, that you'll connect spiritually with God uniquely during this time, and with people as well. This is a time that I keep telling myself, don't let your downtime be anything other than uptime. And what I mean by that is this is still time, and it has been a strange time. It's a very strange time. Again, I went to drop our older daughter off to Philadelphia, where she's a nurse, in the midst of, what they keep saying on the news is the next hot spot and all kinds of things like that. And along the way, we stopped in Washington, D.C., and we were there, and nobody else was there. I mean, we literally walked through the reflection pool and the Lincoln Memorial and even the White House, and it was just like we were the only people on the planet. And it was so surreal. And yet at these times, I have been able to, maybe you have been able to, reflect on life and death issues and what is my life really about. And as people ask, when will it get back to normal? I'm kind of hoping my life never gets back to normal. I do want life to improve and the suffering for people to be alleviated and even death to be avoided. But at the same time, if normal is going through life, taking things for granted and forgetting that it's not about the stuff you can or cannot accumulate. It's not the accomplishments you do or don't accomplish. It's about whether or not you are connected to eternity and whether you'll get to see the people you love again. And I think about that with my mom. I think about that again with the friends that have gone on before, the family members, and the confidence that I have that when my life is over and the flat line happens, nobody who's saying I was lost is right. I'm not lost, and no one should be sorry for my loss. They should be happy for my gain. To live is Christ. To die is gain. So I love this life. I love living it. I love enjoying it. I love seeing things like I'm seeing even today in this beautiful space. But it's not hard to remember here that life can be very hard. And there's a lot of sorrow and a lot of tears and a lot of blood and a lot of sweat. And all those things will someday be over in overtime. So remember, Jesus won in overtime. And it isn't over until it's overtime. Thanks for spending this time. God bless.